Melbourne Control, this is Delta Sierra Juliet. Is there any known traffic below 5,000? Those were the last clear words spoken by 20-year-old pilot Frederick Valentich, just moments before his voice turned to panic, and then, horrifyingly, silence. On the evening of October 21, 1978, Valentich took off in a rented Cessna 182 light aircraft from Moorabbin Airport in Victoria, Australia. He was heading south, across the Bass Strait, to King Island, a journey of just over 125 miles. A simple flight. Routine. Unremarkable. Until it wasn't. At 7:06 p.m., he radioed Melbourne Air Traffic Control to report an unidentified aircraft shadowing him. According to his transmission, the mysterious craft was moving erratically and flying unusually close. Valentich described it as long, with a shiny metallic surface and a green light. It hovered above him. Then it vanished. Then it returned, closer. Air Traffic Control confirmed there were no known aircraft in his vicinity. The chilling audio logs reveal Valentich becoming increasingly distressed. He reported engine problems, moments after describing the strange craft hovering once again. Then, something impossible. "It's not an aircraft," he said. Then, a strange metallic scraping noise filled the transmission. 18 seconds of distortion. Then, nothing. No crash. No explosion. No signal. Frederick Valentich was gone. There was no emergency beacon. No confirmed debris. No sign of the Cessna, no trace of Frederick. Search and rescue teams scoured over 1,000 square miles of ocean and land for 4 days, without success. But what shocked investigators wasn't just the disappearance, it was the context around it. Frederick Valentich was no ordinary pilot. He was young but passionate about aviation. He had aspirations to join the Royal Australian Air Force but had been rejected, twice. Despite having logged only 150 hours of flying time, he had trained extensively on flight simulators and studied aircraft operations deeply. He even filed a legitimate flight plan. This was not a prank. Not a whim. He was serious about flying. And more disturbingly, he had a deep interest in UFOs. In the weeks leading up to his final flight, Valentich frequently discussed extraterrestrials with family and friends. He often speculated that alien crafts may be visiting Earth, and, more ominously, believed that if they were, they might be hostile. Some believed he was paranoid. Others thought he was just fascinated by the unknown. But now, that interest felt like a prophecy. The Department of Transport's official investigation concluded the cause of the disappearance was inconclusive. They could not rule out engine failure, pilot disorientation, or, most eerily, extraterrestrial involvement. Civil aviation authorities admitted that while hoaxes and misidentifications were common, Valentich's case stood apart. He wasn't alone in the sky that night. At least, not in his own mind. But what truly fueled the mystery was what happened after he vanished. Several witnesses came forward, farmers, campers, fishermen, reporting strange lights over the Bass Strait on the same evening Valentich disappeared. Some saw a green light streaking across the sky. Others described a large object hovering silently before darting away at impossible speeds. None of this could be verified. But the timing was chilling. Was Valentich simply disoriented, caught in a freak weather pattern, and hallucinating under stress? Or was he telling the truth, that something was following him? Something not of this earth? For decades, this question has haunted the skies above southern Australia. But the mystery was only beginning. Because 1 year later, on the exact anniversary of Frederick's disappearance, something unexpected surfaced. Something that would send shockwaves through the investigation and reopen questions that had almost faded away. It arrived exactly 1 year later. Same day. Same time. Same place. A lone fisherman off the coast of Cape Otway claimed to have witnessed something that would reignite the mystery with a vengeance, a green light descending into the sea. He wasn't alone. Multiple residents along the southern coast of Victoria reported unexplained aerial lights that night, eerily reminiscent of the descriptions Frederick Valentich had given over the radio before vanishing. The reports flooded local authorities and media alike, prompting a small-scale naval patrol to sweep the coastline for any wreckage, signs of life, or anything that might link back to the young pilot who had disappeared without a trace exactly 365 days earlier. What they found wasn't a body or a piece of aircraft metal. What they found was something far more disturbing. Washed ashore on a remote beach in Flinders was a fragment of an aircraft cowling, badly corroded, but partially matching the description of the type used on a Cessna 182. It was handed over to aviation authorities, who launched a forensic examination. The results were inconclusive. The serial number had been erased by time and salt water, and the paint had almost entirely peeled away. Still, it matched the general model. But not definitively. The Valentich family was notified. Hope surged. But so did dread. Was this the only piece left of their son? Then came something even stranger. A local ham radio operator claimed he had picked up a strange, faint transmission a few months after Frederick's disappearance, somewhere between the frequencies commonly used by private aircraft and international marine communications. The voice, distorted and weak, had only repeated one phrase, over and over, Delta Sierra Juliet. Melbourne. I'm not alone. Authorities dismissed it as a hoax or misinterpreted radio chatter. But to those already convinced of something unexplainable, it was chilling validation. The Valentich family, desperate for answers, hired private investigators and even turned to ufologists. One prominent researcher, Paul Norman, claimed he had received a confidential tip from an anonymous air traffic control source that radar had indeed picked up an unknown object near Valentich's aircraft that night. But the information was buried, classified, and scrubbed from the official report. When pressed, the Department of Transport denied the allegation. But whispers continued. And then came the letters. In 1983, a series of anonymous notes were sent to various media outlets across Australia. Each was postmarked from different regions and written in different styles, but they all contained variations of the same message. Frederick was taken. He is alive. The sky is not ours. The handwriting didn't match. The tone of each note was slightly different. But the implication was clear: someone wanted the world to believe Valentich had been abducted. Or worse, that he was still out there, trapped in something humanity couldn't comprehend. Skeptics, of course, had their own theories. They suggested Valentich staged his own disappearance. That he flew low over the water, intentionally crashed or landed, and escaped to start a new life. Others argued he had become disoriented, caught in a graveyard spiral, an illusion common among inexperienced pilots flying over water at dusk, leading them to believe they were level when in fact they were slowly descending in a spiral until impact. But none of these theories explained the strange metallic noise on the radio. None explained the green lights. None explained the fact that neither Frederick nor his aircraft were ever found, despite an exhaustive search. And then came one final twist, one that shook the Valentich family to their core and made even the most hardened skeptics pause. In 1991, a tourist photo surfaced, taken on King Island, of all places. In the background, nearly out of focus, was a man walking near the cliffs. The grainy image captured only his silhouette. But to Frederick's father, Guido, there was no doubt. That was his son. The man in the photograph was facing away from the camera, shoulders hunched, a windbreaker clinging to his back, and hair tousled by the coastal breeze. But Guido Valentich didn't hesitate. That's Frederick, he whispered, voice trembling, eyes fixed on the photo as if it had breathed life into a ghost. The photo was taken by a tourist couple visiting King Island in the spring of 1991, 13 years after Frederick's disappearance. It had languished in a photo album until one of them, reading a magazine article about the Valentich case, remembered the eerie figure in their shot. They sent it to the Tasmanian police. Local authorities dismissed the lead, citing the lack of facial visibility and the common nature of the clothing. But to Guido, the resemblance was undeniable. The same gait, the same posture, even the way the man held his left arm slightly askew, just as Frederick did due to a childhood injury. His mother agreed. Desperate, the family petitioned the government to reopen the investigation and launch a focused search on King Island. But the request was denied. Too much time had passed, they said. There was no actionable evidence. Still, a few freelance investigators made the trip. What they found was strange and unsettling. King Island locals recalled a peculiar man who had lived on the island briefly in the early 1980s, between 1980 and 1982. He had no clear background, arrived alone, kept mostly to himself, and disappeared just as quietly as he came. No one knew his name. Some said he stayed in an old fishing shack along the eastern coastline, others thought he worked on a dairy farm under the table. One detail was consistent: he avoided attention. And then, there was the boy. In 1993, a man named Clive Rollins came forward with a memory that had haunted him for over a decade. He had been 13 at the time, living with his family on the island when he encountered a strange man while exploring tide pools. The man spoke with an Australian accent, seemed nervous, and asked the boy something bizarre: "Has the search stopped yet? Do they still talk about the one who vanished?" Clive remembered the man scribbling on a notepad with trembling hands before abruptly walking away and vanishing behind a cliff. When the photo of the mysterious figure surfaced years later, Clive saw it, and froze. "That's him," he said. The media seized on the possibility that Frederick Valentich had somehow survived, possibly crash-landed or even washed ashore with his aircraft damaged but intact, and chose to disappear. But how? And why? None of it made sense. The Cessna 182 had a limited range. There was no confirmed landing site. No fuel logs, no sightings, no wreckage. Even if he had survived the crash, how could he have escaped undetected, and stayed hidden for over a decade? Unless he wasn't hiding alone. Unless someone, or something, had helped him disappear. A chilling theory emerged in fringe circles, that Frederick was taken not by accident, but by design. That he had made contact with something inhuman. And what returned, or survived, wasn't entirely him anymore. By the late 1990s, reports of Valentich sightings had become something of a cult phenomenon. Some claimed he had been seen in outback towns, muttering about lights that don't belong. Others swore they'd encountered a man who knew far too much about the Bass Strait disappearances, more than any outsider should. But every sighting ended the same way: the man would vanish, retreat, or deny everything. And yet, one final, terrifying detail refused to fade. In his final recorded transmission, right before the static swallowed his voice, Frederick said, "It's hovering, and it's not an aircraft." So if it wasn't an aircraft, what was it? Before Frederick Valentich vanished, the Bass Strait had already earned a grim reputation. Aviation disasters. Shipwrecks. Entire vessels gone without a trace. But no one talked about it, not publicly. Not until Frederick became its most chilling mystery. Stretching between mainland Australia and Tasmania, the Bass Strait is shallow, volatile, and unpredictable. Storms whip across it with sudden fury, and magnetic anomalies have plagued both mariners and pilots for decades. Locals have long whispered about a cursed corridor, a region where compasses spin, radios fail, and logic goes to die. It has a name: the Bass Strait Triangle. The term first surfaced in the early 1970s, following a string of mysterious aircraft disappearances. Between 1975 and 1978 alone, 5 planes went down in the region, none of them ever fully recovered. In several of these cases, pilots made odd radio calls before losing contact, describing strange lights, engine failure, or an eerie presence around them. But Frederick's disappearance was the one that exploded into public consciousness. And it wasn't just because of the bizarre nature of his final words. It was what followed. Within weeks of his vanishing, local fishermen began reporting more strange sightings. Pulsating green orbs skimming the surface of the water. Unmarked craft moving at impossible speeds, then vanishing straight into the ocean. A lighthouse keeper on Cape Otway claimed he saw a solid black disc hovering silently just above the sea 2 nights after Valentich went missing. His report was never filed officially, it was buried, dismissed as the result of fatigue. But privately, he maintained his story until the day he died. In 2000, an Australian oceanographer, Dr. Marion Kettler, conducted an electromagnetic survey of the seabed just north of King Island. What she found stunned her team: anomalous magnetic readings from the ocean floor, disrupting their equipment in real time. When she submitted the data, the response was swift and quiet. The area was reclassified for military training exercises, and further exploration was denied. Dr. Kettler went public in an interview years later, claiming, "Something is being covered up in the Bass Strait. Something big." The Valentich case was far from the only one. In 1920, the SS Amelia J disappeared in calm waters with 42 passengers aboard. No debris. No distress call. Just gone. In 1935, a commercial pilot reported a flying cylinder above his aircraft while flying the same route Frederick would take decades later. His co-pilot confirmed it. The log was recorded, then vanished from official records. All of these stories were scattered. Until people began connecting the dots. And one disturbing pattern emerged: every case, every encounter, happened within a 200-kilometer radius around King Island. Why there? Some theorized the island sat on a magnetic vortex, a tear in the Earth's electromagnetic field. Others proposed military testing, secret aircraft, cloaking technology, or directed energy experiments that might explain the malfunctions and disappearances. But a darker theory began to take root: whispers of an underwater base. Not military. Not human. A growing number of researchers, including former naval personnel, believed the Bass Strait was home to an unidentified submerged object hub, where crafts entered and exited beneath the waves, invisible to radar, leaving only electromagnetic chaos in their wake. And Frederick Valentich? They believed he flew too close, saw too much, and was taken, not by accident, but because they couldn't let him return. Whether you believe in UFOs or not, one truth remains: the Bass Strait devours the curious. And the deeper you look, the darker it gets. But just when the mystery seemed lost beneath decades of conspiracy and silence, one final revelation surfaced, hidden in the vaults of Australian military archives, sealed since 1978. A radar technician broke his silence after 40 years. And what he saw on his screen the night Valentich vanished would change everything. For over 4 decades, the Australian Department of Defence denied any radar contact with unidentified aircraft on the night Frederick Valentich disappeared. But the technician who manned the screen that evening, Peter Maxwell, remembered otherwise. And he was finally ready to talk. In a taped interview recorded just before his death in 2019 and released posthumously by his family, Maxwell described what he saw on his radar terminal on October 21, 1978, at precisely 7:12 p.m., minutes after Frederick's first distress call. "I saw 2 blips," Maxwell said. "One was Valentich's Cessna. The other was something I couldn't explain. It was moving fast, erratically, circling him." According to Maxwell, the unknown object appeared suddenly, no approach, no identification code, just a solid, fast-moving target. It hovered near Valentich's signal, circled him 3 times, then accelerated upward. And disappeared. Gone. Like a ghost in the system. "I radioed the supervisor," he continued. "He told me to delete the footage. To log the system error as a ghost echo. I never saw that tape again." That testimony sent shockwaves through the small but relentless community of investigators still chasing the Valentich mystery. It confirmed what so many suspected: Frederick was never alone in the sky. But Maxwell's confession wasn't the only revelation. Just months before his death, he mailed a copy of his original shift log to an independent journalist. It included handwritten notes he made during the incident, never officially filed. On the yellowed page, under 1912, he had scribbled: "DSJ shadowed. Second target, no transponder. Too fast for any known model. Ascended. Vanished." Frederick's own final transmission had described something orbiting his aircraft. Maxwell's radar confirmed it. But if the government buried that information, why? Former RAF intelligence officer Marcus Wynne stepped forward soon after the tape aired. Retired and living in seclusion, he claimed Maxwell's radar footage had been seized within hours of the incident by military officials under a joint intelligence order. He stated the object matched known reports of UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, studied in classified programs even Australia wasn't supposed to admit existed. This wasn't just a lost pilot, Wynne insisted. He was intercepted. Still, not everyone believed. Skeptics continued to push more terrestrial explanations. Some pointed to pilot error, suggesting Frederick had become disoriented, entered a graveyard spiral, and imagined the encounter in a moment of hypoxia or fear. Others theorized a murder-suicide. That he had staged his final transmission, crashed intentionally, and took his own life in an elaborate act of delusion or despair. But those who knew him rejected that idea. Frederick had no history of mental illness, no signs of emotional instability. He was passionate about flying. He wanted a future in aviation. He had a girlfriend, a tight-knit family, and aspirations. And there was still no wreckage. No body. No plane. How does someone, and a 4-seat aircraft, vanish completely in a well-traveled corridor, with no oil slick, no debris, and no emergency signal? The truth seemed to lie not in what was found, but in what was erased. Buried radar data. Sealed military files. Discredited witnesses. Anonymous letters. And a final voice transmission cut off by metallic noise and static, like something out of science fiction. But there was still one place no one had dared explore. A location marked on a single page in Maxwell's log, noted just once: contact lost over Cape Otway Shelf. Seabed anomaly. Uncharted cavern? A team of deep-sea surveyors would eventually dive that location in 2022, using the latest sonar and ROV technology. What they found, or rather, didn't find, would push the mystery into an entirely new dimension, one that might finally reveal what happened to Frederick Valentich. They expected to find wreckage. A twisted frame of metal. A shattered wing. Something, anything, that would give closure to a mystery that had tormented Australia for over 40 years. But the sea had other plans. In 2022, a privately funded expedition led by marine geophysicist Dr. Elena Foster launched from Port Campbell toward the location marked in Peter Maxwell's secret radar notes, just off the Cape Otway Shelf. Using advanced sonar and submersible drones, they descended into the cold, pressurized darkness 200 meters below the surface. What they discovered was not wreckage. It was an opening. A massive tear in the seabed, unnaturally smooth, almost architectural in shape. Like a mouth. Silent. Waiting. The entrance measured nearly 40 meters across, plunging straight into the abyss. There were no natural formations nearby that explained it. No volcanic rift. No seismic disruption. Just an opening, framed by strange geometric rock formations that defied erosion patterns. And then the sonar died. The signal from their main probe cut out abruptly, just as it approached the entrance. The backup unit sent a final, garbled image before shutting down, an impossible silhouette deeper in the trench. Circular. Metallic. Motionless. The footage was inconclusive. Blurry. But unmistakably foreign. Dr. Foster's team returned to the surface shaken. Their data mysteriously corrupted. Their sponsor, an anonymous benefactor, abruptly pulled funding and imposed a gag order. But rumors leaked. The Bass Strait wasn't just swallowing aircraft. It was hiding something. Something massive. And maybe something alive. For the Valentich family, the news was both a curse and a comfort. There was still no definitive answer. No body to bury. But there was something down there, something that could explain why their son vanished, why his plane was never found, and why his final words still echoed like a prophecy. It's not an aircraft. Years passed. The Valentich case faded again from the headlines. But the mystery never really let go. In 2024, a small documentary crew revisited the region, filming interviews and collecting forgotten records for a digital series on unsolved disappearances. During their research, they uncovered an obscure audio recording stored in a local historical archive in Moorabbin, a mislabeled reel from the original 1978 air traffic communications. At the end of the tape, faint but distinct, was a fragment that had never been broadcast publicly. After Frederick's last official words, after the metallic noise, there was one final line, barely audible: "They're here." The phrase was repeated twice. Whispered. As if Frederick was no longer talking to Melbourne Control, but warning them. Or worse. Becoming one of them. The tape was authenticated. No evidence of tampering. No cuts. It had simply been misfiled, buried under decades of dust and bureaucracy. This final piece, just 4 seconds long, changed nothing. And yet, everything. Because it meant Frederick Valentich may have known, in his last moments, exactly what was happening. That he hadn't lost control. He hadn't panicked. He had realized the truth. That he wasn't just seeing a strange light. He wasn't just experiencing engine trouble. He had made contact. And whatever he encountered that night, never intended to let him go. To this day, no confirmed trace of Frederick Valentich or his Cessna 182 liters has been found. Just static. Just silence. And the memory of a voice, lost over dark waters, telling the world something impossible. They're here.